This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. You're lying to me. You're the only martial supreme on this warship. Michaud warned carefully. Liao Yang sneered coldly, if that's the case, then what are you afraid of, Lord Mi Gaoyang? Or why did we teleport to this damn place? This was indeed what Michael was most afraid of. He could not think of anything else to do after being teleported to the wilderness. He said coldly, since you're here to catch me, I'm right here. Come and catch me. Liao Yangbing looked calm on the surface, but he was extremely anxious on the inside. He had no idea where the other two martial supremes were. Moreover, it seemed like it was impossible for them to rescue the other two martial supremes in such a short time. It was not a good idea to delay. I'm not interested in catching you, Yunxiao said indifferently. I'll forget about the damaged warship just now. Get lost. Michael's eyes turned cold, and he said, little brat, you're courting death. I wanted to kill Liao Yangbing and then take you under my command, but you can't live anymore. Standing in the distance, he did not dare to come forward. Instead, he shot out a beam of light as fast as lightning, killing an 8-stars martial supreme in the blink of an eye. Even though Yunxiao had shown great courage in the war between the two races, he was only an 8-stars martial supreme after all. Yunxiao turned his body slightly to the side and dodged the finger beam. Then, with a bang, he shot backward and pierced through the entire warship. What's going on? Mi Gaoyang was stunned for a moment. The speed of his finger beam was by no means something an 8-stars martial supreme could dodge. And the strangest thing was that Yunxiao had turned his body very casually just now, without using any movement technique. The faces of the other teams changed dramatically. They were so scared that they became nervous as if they were facing a great enemy. Cold sweat was oozing out of Liao Yangbing's forehead, and he was anxious. He sent a voice transmission to Yunxiao, this man has the strength of a 6-stars martial emperor. We can't defeat him. Let's not provoke him anymore. To his surprise, Yunxiao turned a deaf ear to his words and took a step out of the air, walking toward Michael instead. His face turned cold as he said in a cold voice, since you're courting death, no one can save you. When the members of the Battle Blade team heard that, they all fainted on the spot, their eyes wide open, wondering why Yunxiao was so stupid. I'm courting death? No one can save me? Michael threw his head back and laughed. After a few laughs, he looked at Yunxiao's face, which was as cold as frost, and his eyes flashed with killing intent as he said, how cold. This joke is not funny at all. Because it's not a joke, Yunxiao said. It's not a joke, he said. You? Michael scoffed. An 8-star martial supreme? As soon as Yunxiao's aura spread out, his primordial energy exploded in the surroundings, and his cultivation base shot up in a straight line. 8-star martial supreme, peak 8-star martial supreme, 9-star martial supreme, peak 9-star martial supreme, and it was still rising. The members of the Battle Blade team were all shocked. They finally understood why Yunxiao's performance was so powerful, and why he was not on the same level as them at all. A martial sovereign of the 9 heavens. Liao Yangbing was also shocked. Although he had expected it when Yunxiao gave him support earlier, he could not hide his shock when he saw it in person. He had mixed feelings. This kind of cultivation speed was completely indescribable. Michael's pupils contracted, and he said coldly, no wonder he's so arrogant. He's been suppressing his strength. But even so, if you think you can kill me, you're too naive. Yunxiao did not say a word, but his aura was still rising. Soon, he had reached the peak of a 1-star martial emperor, and there was no sign of him stopping. Liao Yangbing gasped and was shocked, is he not a 1-star martial emperor? How long has it been since the opening of planet Tianhuang? A light of advancement shone directly from Yunxiao's body, and a strange light appeared in the sky. The power of laws fell from the sky and was completely absorbed by him. He advanced on the spot? Everyone was stunned. After Yunxiao's aura rushed into the level of a 2 stars martial sovereign, it gradually stabilized and did not rise any further. Michaud heaved a sigh of relief and laughed mockingly. You've just stepped into the 2-stars martial sovereign realm. You're quite talented, but that doesn't give you the right to be so arrogant. Today, you'll pay the price for this. Without saying a word, Yunxiao waved his hand in the air, and a gust of cold air immediately spread out in the air, like snow falling for thousands of miles. Michaud was shocked to find a sword in his opponent's hand. The sunlight was reflected off the sword and turned into ice. Yunxiao held the sword in his hand, and the aura of a peerless expert vaguely burst out of his body like a dragon, which changed the color of the world. But in the eyes of the crowd, they thought it was the influence of the sword. Good sword, it's really a good sword. Michael's eyes were filled with greed. He licked his lips and laughed. You don't deserve such a good sword. Give it to me. He took a step forward and was about to snatch the sword. Yunxiao's eyes gradually turned cold, just like the cold air on the cold sword. Wherever he looked, it would almost be frozen. He waved the sword a few times in his hand, and the feeling of power was immediately restored. As he raised the sword high, the wind and clouds changed, and the whole sky darkened in an instant. A strange force spread out around the sword, and countless tiny ice crystals condensed around Yunxiao, making him look extraordinarily beautiful. Mi Gaoyang and Liao Yongbing trembled as they looked at the sword pointing at the sky in horror. They were both 9 heavens martial sovereigns who had comprehended the rules of heaven and earth, and they were the best among the mid-stage martial sovereigns. Naturally, they could feel the inexplicable power in heaven and earth, and their comprehension of the rules was getting weaker and weaker. What's going on? Michael was terrified. An indescribable fear spread in his heart. The inexhaustible power of the world was leaving him little by little, and he could not hold on to it. What demonic art did you use? He suddenly let out a loud roar. He knew that if he continued to allow the strange phenomenon to continue, he would really be in danger. Suddenly, all his potential exploded, and a long sword that was as clear as green jade slowly appeared in his hand. Only when the blade was in his hand did he find a trace of security. 9 Springs Divine Blade. Rays of jade-colored chi bloomed from the blade. With a loud roar, it slashed out, splitting the sky and earth. Under the suppression of his opponent's sword momentum, Michaud launched his strongest attack in an attempt to drive away the endless fear. Yunxiao's pupils constricted as he said softly, "Sorry, I'm in a hurry." Sword slashes Starchin. He muttered. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone felt their minds go blank and almost lost consciousness. They only felt that the world was spinning, and the entire space was in a huge energy vortex. Their divine sense and strength were just a drop in the ocean, and they were completely out of their control. On the other hand, Liao Yangbing's cultivation was naturally not as high as the Warblade team's. He could clearly see the frost sword slashing down. However, he could sense that it was not just the frost sword, but the entire world that was slashing down. Under that force, the Michaud was annihilated without a doubt. Bang! The jasper saber also broke into pieces, sending countless jade shards flying everywhere. It was destroyed on the spot. Stomp! Yunxiao turned and returned to the warship. Let's go, he said. No one could come back to their senses. The strange color in the sky had not disappeared. A terrifying gray cloud was constantly rotating, and starlight flickered inside. From time to time, there was also a green light shuttling back and forth, not dissipating for a long time. The members of the Battle Blade team were already dumbfounded. Only Liao Yangbing looked up at the strange phenomenon in the sky. He felt his body turn cold, without a trace of warmth. Some divine martial techniques could create a certain phenomenon when they were performed under a powerful force. However, the whole world was thrown into chaos by that sword. Never mind seeing it, he had never even heard of it. He stood there in a daze, feeling at a loss. After a while, the divine ability phenomenon in the world slowly dissipated on its own, and the world returned to its original clear state. If it weren't for the fact that Michael's broken jade sword was still glowing on the ground, everyone would have thought that it was a dream. What did I just see? Liang Yuanji wiped the sweat off his forehead and said in a trembling voice, "Lord." Lord Feiyang killed a 6-star martial sovereign with one sword strike? The rest of the people who were in a daze also quivered when they heard this, and they recovered from their endless blank minds. Chen Zhongwei swallowed his saliva and said, "Heavens, heavens. What kind of person was he? What kind of existence was he? A high-level martial supreme? Only high-level martial sovereigns above 7 stars could kill a 6-star martial emperor with one move. It was impossible even for a peak rank 6 martial emperor." Gulp. The red-haired man swallowed with great difficulty. He felt that his throat was very dry and thirsty. He trembled in fear and said, We even provoked him and fought with him." The faces of Guan Xingyang and the other 8 stars martial venerable also changed drastically, and all of a sudden, their faces turned pale. "Don't worry, everyone," Liang Yuanji said. "If Lord Feiyang wanted to find trouble with you, why would he still be here? Even 100 of you would be dead." Everyone was relieved when they thought of this. The rest of the people felt a little excited. They were extremely excited when they thought about how they had stayed with a high-level martial emperor for so long and even called him brother. Liao Yangbing's face also slowly regained its color. He shook slightly. He would not have been so shocked if Yunxiao was a high-level martial emperor. It was very normal for a high-level martial emperor to kill a mid-stage martial emperor with one move, but the key was that he only had the strength of a 2-star martial emperor. Liao Yangbing smiled wryly and thought to himself that it was a good thing that he had not offended him in any way. Otherwise, this man would be too terrifying. If he was allowed to grow, he would definitely be the overlord of the world in the future and a martial sovereign. He couldn't help but admire Jiang Churen's foresight. The number one of the younger generation was indeed worthy. After sighing a few times, he walked into the cabin. Yunxiao had gone straight inside after the sword strike. No matter how heaven-defying he was, he must have suffered a great loss and was recuperating inside. It was the first time Yunxiao had used the Star Slasher since he was reborn. Unfortunately, it was too weak to support the ultimate evolution, but it was more than enough to kill Michael. After one move, he was completely exhausted and directly returned to the secret room to recuperate. After the time it took to finish a cup of tea, Liao Yangbing paced back and forth in front of the secret chamber. He wanted to knock on the door several times, but he held back. It was not until Yunxiao called him in that he dared to push the door open and walk in. Yunxiao's face was pale, and his body was shrouded in a layer of primordial qi. He was holding 2 primordial cores in his hands and absorbing them, just as he had expected. The two of them looked at each other for a while, as if waiting for the other to speak. "Do you have thousands of doubts in your heart, but you don't know how to ask them?" Yunxiao said with a smile. Liao Yangbing smiled bitterly. This man not only had shocking strength, but he was also as meticulous as he was. As long as he didn't die too early, he would definitely be the future overlord of the world. He sighed and said, "I, Liao Yangbing, can be considered to be extremely talented. I've been proud of myself for being able to reach the realm of a 5-star martial sovereign without any background from a major force. Now, I know that I'm still shallow." "Lord Yangbing, you don't have to be so modest," Yunxiao said. "Your talent and opportunity are indeed 1 in a million. It is very likely that you will become a high-level martial supreme in the future." "Thank you for your kind words, young Master Yunxiao," Liao Yangbing quickly bowed and said. "You didn't come here just to tell me this, did you?" Yunxiao asked. Liao Yangbing smiled and said, "There's one more thing. Young Master's suggestion of leaving the Baiming family behind and acting alone, I think it makes sense. I'll do my best to cooperate with young Master Yunxiao." Yunxiao laughed as well and said, "If that's the case, then I'll have to rely on Sir Yangbing." The effect of him killing Michael with one sword strike had shown itself, and his efforts were not in vain. The sword had a great influence on Liao Yangbing, not only in visual and spiritual shock, but also in the desire and will to build a good relationship with Yunxiao after careful consideration. All of these made Liao Yangbing determined to follow Yunxiao to the end. Liao Yangbing thought a lot after coming out of the secret room and began to plan a plan to act alone. In terms of understanding of the East Ocean, there were not many people in the human race who knew more than him. The members of the Battle Blade team were still stunned by Yunxiao's sword strike. They were not only shocked, but also had a vague feeling that they had touched something. One by one, they began to meditate and cultivate, hoping to make a breakthrough. The battleship flew for a day and a night. On the second day, they discovered the situation and a voice transmission talisman flew into the secret chamber. Yunxiao's primordial energy had been mostly recovered. If he had not been so exhausted, he would have fully recovered at his cultivation speed. After a while, he arrived on the deck. Everyone turned around and looked at him with a serious expression. They all stood straight as if they were waiting for an inspection. Even Liao Yangbing had a strange feeling in his heart, and he gradually became more cautious in front of him. "You don't have to be like this," Yunxiao said. "I'm still the vice captain of the Battle Blade team. I'll do what I did before." No, I can't." Liang Yuanji started to get nervous and shook his head hurriedly. "No matter what, Lord Feiyang cannot be under me. You are the leader, I am the vice leader." Yunxiao knew that after he showed his strength, he could no longer restore the equal and harmonious relationship he had before. Looking at everyone's determined and affirmative eyes, he did not hesitate and said, "All right then, let's do that for now." Only then did everyone reveal a look of joy, especially Liang Yuanji. He felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders and let out a sigh of relief. "Sir Feiyang, something has indeed happened in Baicheng City." "Look ahead," Liao Yangbing said. Yunxiao looked over and saw the image of a city in the distance, but it was hidden in a light curtain, obviously covered by a restrictive barrier. "No wonder the teleportation failed," Yunxiao said. "I'm afraid there's something wrong with the teleportation array in the city. I just don't know if the restrictive barrier is a defensive array or a spell cast by the sea race." The Golden Sun battleship was flying in the air when a layer of light suddenly appeared in front of it. It was like a bubble with a thin membrane. The moment the battleship entered the membrane, its speed was greatly reduced. "Who is it?" As soon as the restriction was activated, a loud shout rang out and several figures appeared in front of the starship. Everyone looked over, and their hearts trembled. The people in front of them were green in color, and they had feelers on their heads. Their faces were covered in red hair, and they could tell with a single glance that they were sea race warriors. "It's a human, die." When those people saw the people on the battleship, they turned into 7 beams of light and rushed over without saying a word. "Humph." Yunxiao snorted. With a cold look on his face, he drew a few incantation seals in the air and slapped them on the warship. With a cheese sound, a defense opened up and directly collided with the 7 rays of light, shaking the 7 people away. Then, the battleship tilted to the side and a ray of light shot out from the body of the battleship. With a boom, one of the people was blown into pieces. "Mr. Feiyang, you're too playful," Liao Yangbing said. "It's a piece of cake to deal with these few pieces of trash. There's no need to go through the trouble of using the warship's power." "Then I'll have to trouble you, Lord Yangbing," Yunxiao said with a smile. Liao Yangbing lowered his head and was about to attack when Liang Yuanji said, "It's just a few martial venerables. My lords, please take a rest." He gave a signal with his eyes, and the 20 members of the Warblade team immediately rushed out and surrounded the remaining 6 members. "Leave him alive," Yunxiao said with a smile. "I want him alive." Immediately, 5 of them were directly blown up by more than 10 attacks on the spot, and one of them was hit by Guanxingyang and spat out a mouthful of blood, flying to the deck. Yunxiao grabbed the man in the air, and without asking anything, he sent a stream of spiritual power into his mind and began searching his soul. The Sea Tribe member's body trembled violently as his eyes became more and more lifeless. In the end, his eyes became empty, without any light of consciousness. Bang! Yunxiao blew him up with a punch after he was done searching, and a thoughtful look appeared on his face. People stood around quietly, not daring to disturb him. "Baicheng City has not fallen," Yunxiao said. "Only the teleportation array has been destroyed." The marine race had set up restrictions to prevent any information from being leaked, and they were gradually annihilating the enemy. "We've come at just the right time." If we're strong enough, we can help whitewash city and break the seal, sending the message back. Everyone was shocked, and their expressions turned grave. The battle had indeed begun to escalate, turning into a large-scale war. Liao Yangbing put away the battleship and took out a jade talisman. He quickly inserted some runes and broke it. Suddenly, a rune slowly rose and disappeared in the air. Just as everyone was about to fly toward Baichong City, a group of bright spots suddenly appeared behind them and quickly flew to their side. It was the other team.
Ha!
Sir Yangbing, I finally found you. The leader was Ruan Shichuan, and behind him was the Gan Wuqin team. When they saw Yunxiao and the others, they all frowned. Only the two cultivators who had been assigned to go over had a look of joy on their faces. They immediately returned to the group, causing the faces of Gan Wuqin and the others to be covered in a layer of frost. Oh, it's Lord Shichuan. Liao Yangbing said happily. He quickly told them about the information he had obtained about Whitewash City. Now that the two teams had joined forces, the chances of them breaking through the blockade and protecting Whitewash City had increased. He said, I wonder where Lord Lechi is right now. If the three teams were to combine into one, it would be a perfect plan. Ruan Shichuan's expression turned ugly as he said, I didn't expect things to be so serious. Let's go. He was about to take the lead and fly away when he suddenly stopped. He turned around to look at Yunxiao and said, You're Li Feiyang, right? Can you give me the dead body of the ghost eel you got outside the sky-reaching city? Of course, I will not take your things for free. I have a peak 8th tier profound armament here to exchange with you. A peak 8th tier profound level weapon was obviously not worth that price, not to mention that the ghost eel commander's body was an innate formation body. In the eyes of a formation master, even a peak 9th tier profound level weapon could not be compared. However, as a 6th tier martial emperor, Ruan Shichuan did not have Yunxiao's choice to bargain with him. He would basically be forced to buy and sell. Gan Wuqin didn't even try to hide his smugness and gloating. On the other hand, the members of the Battle Blade team were all calm, but they had strange looks in their eyes. Liao Yangbing, on the other hand, had a drastic change in expression, knowing that things were going to be bad. Yunxiao glanced at Ruan Shichuan and said indifferently, No, I won't. What? Ruan Shichuan frowned, and a martial emperor's pressure was instantly released. His face gradually darkened. He did not expect the other party to reject him. He said coldly, Is it because my 8th tier pinnacle profound armament is not worth that price, or are you looking down on me, Ruan Shichuan? All the members of Gan Wuqin's team wore mocking looks on their faces, as if they were watching a good show. But, they were also surprised that Yunxiao had such a backbone. Liao Yangbing sighed in his heart and stood out. Lord Shiquan, this is not the time for a transaction. Let's first resolve the crisis in Baichong City before we discuss this matter. Ruan Shichuan snorted and said coldly, Baichong City's crisis is of great importance, and it won't happen in a short time. Kid, I'm asking you a question. I thought it wasn't worth that price, Yunxiao said. But now, I look down on you. What did you say? Ruan Shichuan suspected that he had heard wrong. The aura around him exploded, sending Gan Wuqin and the others, who were gloating behind him, flying dozens of meters away. A few of the weaker ones even spat out blood. They were so shocked that they could not care less about their own injuries. Instead, they looked at Yunxiao in shock, wondering why he would say such words that would kill him. An 8th tier mystic artifact in exchange for the body of a high-level martial sovereign of the Sea Tribe is no different from robbery, Yunxiao said coldly. I really look down on you from the bottom of my heart. Cold. The entire place was filled with an indescribable chill.